We are going to be speaking this morning about cognitive biases, cognitive dissonance, and conspiracy theories, to be completely alliterative, the big three C's. And let me just look at you. Do you think, class, these big three C's are kind of a big deal right now? Cognitive bias, cognitive dissonance, conspiracy theory? Well, you and me and the hosts at NPR Marketplace would all agree that this is kind of a big deal right now. So I believe that it's important for us to speak about it. Let's talk a little bit about cognitive biases. So you've probably heard of negativity bias. If you have hung out with me at all, you've definitely heard of negativity bias. Give me a thumbs up or a head nod if you have heard of negativity bias, right? So negativity bias is this instinctual, this inborn tendency to sort of encode and remember bad experiences first, because that helps you survive, right? If you forget where the good berries are, you can probably find another patch of good berries, but if you forget where the saber-toothed tiger's den is, you don't get another option. So negativity bias helps keep us survive. But did you know that there's another bias called optimism bias? Has anyone ever heard of this one? Optimism bias? This was kind of news to me because I'm such a fan of negativity bias, apparently. Optimism bias was news to me. And it's not, lest thou beest confused. I just went back to the King James era, excuse me. Lest you be, it was because lest, who says that anymore? Lest you be confused, thou congregants. It's not what I'll sometimes say like a positivity bias, which is a way you could train your mind to answer for negativity bias. We can train our mind. Who's the researcher? Anyway, the guy who wrote Buddha's Brain, whose name isn't coming to mind, says, ordinarily we're like Velcro for negative thoughts and Teflon for positive ones, but you could train to reverse that. You could be Velcro for gratitude, for optimism, and Teflon for powerlessness and learned helplessness, right? That would be a positivity bias. Optimism bias is different. This is the thing that happens where humans tend to overestimate our chances compared to everyone else. Like, it's this weird thing that we tend to think, oh, well, the statistics say this, well, I'm likely to beat those odds, me. So for example, AAA did a poll. Let me put my microphone in here so we get good sound for the recording. Excuse me, I hope this doesn't pop. Anyway, AAA did a poll, and they found that 8 out of 10 drivers believe they are above average drivers. Statisticians, you do the math. Can 8 out of 10 be above average? So it's an example of optimism bias. Similarly, first-time bungee jumpers all tend to believe that they are less likely to be injured than other first-time bungee jumpers. And so on and so forth goes optimism bias. So optimism bias may be important because right now, according to a researcher I learned about last week, Mary Helwig Larson, and hey, we're on the internet. I'll even put the link to an article in your chat box for you. This researcher, psychologist from Dickinson College, believes that optimism bias may be playing a big part in why people don't want to comply with the recommendations from organizations like the CDC for reducing the risk of our global pandemic. Why? Boy, that was a lot of words in one sentence, but let's unpack it. People think they have a better chance of surviving or thriving if they contract this illness, and they think they have a better chance of not getting it than is actually true. There is extraneous noise from your mic. Oh, that's because I have to hold it away from my shirt while I gesticulate. Thank you for the chats, you guys. You're all tech support here. You're all tech support. Okay, tell me if it's better as we go along. So with something like a global pandemic, we need people to know, like, hey, you know, the best science we've got says if you wear a mask and they wear a mask, like, transmission is way down. And then if you wash your hands before you go into the grocery store and after you go into the grocery store, like if you're an asymptomatic carrier, like, wow, way down. Like, we could nip this thing in the bud. CDC director a while ago said, like,
6 weeks, if everybody wore a mask, we could get a handle on this thing. Wow. But what happens with optimism bias? Well, we think, oh, well, not me, not my group of friends. We're above average. We're above the average. Another bias, so optimism bias, real interesting cognitive bias. Another that plays in here is the salience bias, or the salience heuristic. And this comes from research by Kahneman, whose famous book is Thinking Fast and Slow. I highly recommend. Well, I don't know if I recommend it. It's a big bear of a book to try to read, but it's got great stuff. So salience bias, Kahneman translates into what you see is all there is. This is how the mind works. What you see is all there is, right? So this is salience bias. Now, there might be problems with it. Somehow this got encoded into our Homo sapien ancestors, or whoever came before Homo sapiens. Like, this really worked for them. But for us, with social media and internet search engines that tailor what you see based on what you already are prone to believe, we have now, because of this internal heuristic that, like, whatever we see, whatever's most available information tends to be what we believe, right? So if you're only getting information that confirms beliefs you already hold, we have designed a system that creates entrenched cognitive dissonance. With just to continue to focus on COVID-19, one of the interesting things is that when you get ill, you become less visible, right? You quarantine at home, you go in hospital. So the amount of ill people in your face, until you get to where we are right now, which is where everyone's about to know someone who has gotten sick or died with this, right? It hasn't been that way up to this point. That's how epidemics work. That's how pandemics work. And so it's invisible. If you haven't seen someone you know get sick, the salience heuristic says, well, I don't see it, so it must be true that it's not there. Wow. Similarly, if you're not buddies with someone at a particularly at-risk population, or who knows about that, those folks have already quarantined themselves. They already took themselves out of the picture as early adopters. So your friend with, who's taking immune suppressive drugs for an organ transplant, your friend with MS, your friend with Lyme disease, your friend who got pneumonia too many times from traveling, things like that, they're already out of the picture, and they're not triggering your salience heuristic. And your mind, just by a trick of the mind, believes they don't exist, right? So we've got a big, interesting challenge these days. Wouldn't you agree that the things that were put in there to help humanity survive, like, I think optimism bias is to help you do heroic things on behalf of the tribe, right? Like, the tribe is going to survive if you've got this heroic mindset. Like, I think I could take down that elk. He's really big, but I've got an above average chance. And if you try it, nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? Something like that. So maybe optimism bias came from there. But in this era, optimism bias and salience heuristic are a big problem. You can confirm this as well by watching this great documentary, The Social Dilemma, if you'd like to know more about how your Google searches are tied to what you already believe. And so the people in this congregation, we have some shared beliefs, I believe. If you don't think that science is good, you'll probably log off pretty quick from this sermon. So we might have a similar Google feed, a similar Facebook feed, a similar social feed, but it'll also be slightly tuned to us because we tend to like what's familiar. This is another of those heuristics, that we enjoy familiarity, and we mistake familiarity for truth. Advertisers know this. This is how name recognition works in advertising. If you can expose someone to an idea, I think it's about 7 times, whether or not there's any good arguments or evidence for the idea, the mind starts to believe it. So imagine then that you wanted people to believe that, George Soros was, even though he's Jewish, he's also a Nazi, and somehow he funded Barack Obama to, oh, what's the one I just heard? To train a body double for Osama bin Laden and kill that guy instead and leave bin Laden alive, and then kill the Navy SEAL team to cover it up. You know, if if you were prone to believe stuff like that, and then I just exposed you to it more and more through your social media feed, maybe I had somebody in a high office of the United States repeat this stuff without any evidence, your brain would start to believe it just through continued exposure without the need for evidence. How the primate part of us works. Oh, so it's kind of a big problem. Yes. So cognitive biases can dramatically impact our behavior. Right now, you may be seeing an intriguing phenomenon where the risk levels have not gone down, but people are acting like the pandemic just went away. Has anybody noticed that in their buddies or on a social media feed or on the news? It's like, oh, well, it's been a while, so maybe let's just forget about it. I'm tired of this. Let's just assume it went away. Nothing's happened yet. And these biases turn our brain into a way that can harm self or others. If you read that article that I posted from Mary Hedwig Larson, or whatever it was, you get the name in there, she proposes that an answer to this type of cognitive dissonance may actually not be thinking about oneself, which triggers that optimism bias, but thinking about your behavior as a moral thing, about the protection of others, may slightly skirt around that optimism bias. But we're going to talk about other ways to skirt that as well. So in Kahneman's work in Thinking Fast and Slow, he talks about this as the difference between system one thinking, which system one is the part of your mind responsible for the Olympic art of jumping to conclusions, right? We have this in our mind because our minds need to be fast to respond to threat. So system one jumps to conclusions. System two is the part of your brain that if you go to a relationship coach, they force you to talk in system two language. Is that true? When she said this, what did you hear? Well, it makes you think a little deeper. System two is required to do algebra or calculus or to become a sociologist, or I sure hope it stays required to be a judge. So system one versus system two thinking. All right, moving right along. So Salien's heuristic, we already got it. You got a tailored news feed. And then finally enters cognitive dissonance. We all know about cognitive dissonance, right? I think I've talked about it in one of these sermons, but cognitive dissonance is where you pair an idea, a belief, with your sense of self. You pair an idea with your sense of self, not consciously, this is an unconscious process. And so when someone threatens or questions your belief, your fight or flight system lights up as if they threw a punch at you, as if they threatened your life or your family. So my belief that the earth is flat, my belief that Hunter Biden is such and such becomes part of who I am. And just through the process of ego making that that's who I am, if you threaten that belief, I feel threatened and I respond as if it's come to blows, right? Your adrenaline and cortisol output respond as if it's come to blows. Your heart rate, your norepinephrine and epinephrine are, pounding your heart and raising your blood pressure. And in your brain, the blood flow goes from the relationship counseling, doing algebra, envisioning the society we all long to live in, and to the part of how do I get these other chimps to stop messing with my chimp band by hurting them. That's what happens when you have cognitive dissonance online. You're having a fight or flight response, a survival response to your ideas and beliefs being threatened. This could be a little challenging, don't you think? So this is a big problem, as we see in many situations, and especially those where someone is engaging around what we might call a conspiracy theory. It's enough to make some thinkers say we've moved from the information age to the disinformation age. we're living in a society right now, probably by accident and a little bit of the accident of what makes money, that we are tailoring how we receive information in ways that increase cognitive dissonance rather than increase mutuality, understanding, and reason. Okay, what are you going to do about it? Okay, so here's my call to you. First, it starts with the question, what is the opposite of cognitive dissonance? If you'd like to play my game, write in the chat box, what do you think is the opposite of cognitive dissonance? What is the opposite of cognitive dissonance? Oh yeah, and in the chat box, I see someone's conservative relative lent them the laptop, and the Google is completely different on a conservative laptop than on one's own laptop. Yeah. So yeah, people just going back to normal life. And in fact, things aren't normal. So anybody want to play my game? I'll wait. Sometimes they take a minute to roll through. So I don't know if you've put in an answer. What's the opposite of cognitive dissonance? It's okay. I have an answer if you don't come up with one. Open-mindedness. I'm not depending on you. Open-mindedness is a great way to say an opposite of cognitive dissonance. Okay, well, I'll give you my opposite of cognitive integration. I like it. Satisfaction. Oh, interesting. Yeah. So mine, poetically, I thought the opposite of cognitive dissonance is cognitive resonance. The opposite of cognitive dissonance is cognitive resonance. Ooh, I was just using the words, man. Dissonance, resonance. So let's see. Well, what do you mean there, Reverend Fa Jun? Cognitive resonance. Does that mean that you want me to speak nice to people with horrible ideas? What do you think? Survey says, do you think Reverend Fa Jun says, hey, they're encouraging people to horrendous acts. Should I be nice? Not what I'm saying at all. Not what I'm saying at all. Reverend Fa Jun, does that mean you want me to feed the trolls? Do you want me to feed the trolls, Reverend? What's a troll? That's somebody who goes on the internet with the express purpose of making you have a bad day, right? They're actually not there for mutual exchange. They are there just to make you have a bad day. Reverend Fa Jun, do I have to be sweet to the trolls? Do I have to give the trolls more ammunition? No, this is not cognitive resonance. So rule number one, of course, don't feed the trolls. No problem with that. Rule number two, don't enable horrendous and nefarious ideas. If we're going to talk about cognitive resonance, we have to come down on that we're not platforming Nazis. We are not giving loudspeakers to misogynists. We are not giving equal ground to bigotry as we are to mutuality. That's not what cognitive resonance means. But what it does mean, perhaps, is two things from Reverend Fa Jun. I think I made up this word. I didn't do an internet search to see if anyone came up with it before, but I think I came up with cognitive resonance. And for me, it means two things. Number one, we humans are continually seeking to be understood. We're seeking for mutual recognition, or put simply, for empathy. We long to feel felt. Our instinctual wiring makes us know that not being made an other is of prime importance. The primate that lives inside of us is constantly seeking for threats to it being cast out of the tribe. And so we're wired that if we receive signals that we're being othered, that we're being dehumanized, we can do one of two things. We either fawn and try to get back into the good graces, or we create our own sect so that we can fight and beat up the people that we disagree with. Right? This is just how our primate brains are wired. With that, the other thing to know is that we are always in resonance with each other. I mean, not a sonorous resonance, but we're always resonating with each other. Gottman's research shows this, that in couples, they're constantly looking at little micro expressions of love, of gratitude, or of disgust, or of even hatred. And that even though these don't register to our conscious mind, they do register to our monkey mind. So we're constantly resonating off of each other. with the micro expressions we make. Paul Ekman's work is really great on this as well, with the word choice that we use, with our use of all caps or ellipses or anything on the internet when you're speaking. All of this creates resonance one to another. So the idea is not being friendly, but we might ask, how do we sow the seeds of a culture that doesn't further entrench cognitive dissonance, but allows for its erosion? How do we plant cognitive resonance instead? In the chat box is that quote from Reverend Fa Jun, straight out of my sermon notes. Okay, so I wanted to give you this trick because would you, let me check and look at your faces, would you agree that these are some of the most annoying interactions in the world, right? Someone comes with an idea different than yours, and then you say, well, what's your evidence for that idea? And then they just get loud and somehow manage to like dodge hearing that you even asked for a civil conversation, right? You were ready to do your part, weren't you? Well, I have a different viewpoint. Let's question this together. And then they just yelled at you or something. What's up? Have you experienced that? I have experienced this plenty. Or they just, you know, they sent you 5 hours of YouTube videos and they're like, if you just watch, you'll wake up. You'll be awakened and then you'll come over to our side and not on your side when you're so dumb, right? Yeah, and the quote from the comment from the chat box, that's how you know when you've won, in a way, but it's also how you know when you've lost, if the game is to not continue widening the divide and encouraging cognitive dissonance, right? That's actually how we know that propagandists have won. That's actually how we know that nefarious, okay, here's my conspiracy theory. There are nefarious social engineers out there, and they're not necessarily making body doubles for so-and-so or making the 5G program your brain to do something, but they would like you divided, because divided means disempowered. They would like you hateful, because when you're hateful, you have the least amount of brainstorming capacity. And they would like you scared, because when you're scared, you tend to live your values less and react more. If I were a nefarious social engineer, I would love what's going on the internet nowadays. Okay, so it's not very fun. It's actually kind of a big bummer. What can you do about it? I wanted to give you a couple of tips for when you thought you were going to have a civil debate and blah, blah, and maybe come to mutually understanding, and then nope, they're entrenched. They're obviously cognitively dissonant. What might you do instead of just leaving, right? Of course, don't feed the trolls. Deplatform bigots, of course. But if you thought maybe it's my job to try today, maybe I can be a drop in the bucket against the continual divisionism that rules the land, what might you do? Well, the first, principle one, is to understand that they're not there for a debate. They are there for empathy. They are not actually there for a debate. They are there for empathy. They might think they're there for a debate, but by their responses, you can understand that's not what they're there for. They're there to call names. They're there to lash out. They're there to try to create division. And your job is to not let them succeed. But why do we call names for each other? I bet even some of you good-hearted, well-meaning critters out there still have a day where in your mind you start calling names on people. Have you had it? Have you had a day like, oh, those rassafras, sassafras? Okay, and then if you got really woke up on the wrong side, you might even out loud call someone a name. Has anyone done this in the last, yeah, every once in a while, you son of a stuff. What makes us get that way? Is it because we're happy? No. Is it because, oh, I'm so resourced and I understand our connection. I'm just feeling like I have something to give. No, it's not that. It's because we're tired, we're hopeless, we're in despair. We've had names called at us too often. We're lacking resources, we're lacking help, we're lacking tools. When people come and call names at you, They may be tools for the nefarious social engineers. Don't get me wrong. But the only way we can speak that way to each other is if we're profoundly under-resourced. If we're profoundly under-resourced. So what I wanted to offer is a big monkey wrench in where our instinctual brain goes. They bring that and our instinctual brain goes, all right, it's time to go to battle. And maybe we might even think that the most ethical thing we could do is to go to battle with this name caller, with this disciple of divisionism. Isn't it my moral, like, am I not required? Am I not compelled to go to battle with this name caller? Well, yes, but how you battle them is perhaps by looking at the long-term goal, planting the seeds of a society that furthers cognitive resonance rather than cognitive dissonance. So step one, know that they're not even there for a debate, even though they themselves are deluded about that. They think they're there for debate. No, they are there to off-gas these terrible energies. They're feeling so uncomfortable. They thought you might be someone to dump that on, but guess what? You're not. Because you know that you're there because they desperately need empathy. Okay, quick note on empathy. Empathy does not mean being sweet. Empathy does not mean being civil. Oh, let's be civil with each other. It does not mean being sweet, does not mean being civil. It means helping them feel felt. Empathy does not mean condoning a person's strategy. Empathy does not mean believing a person's story. All empathy means is refusing to dehumanize the person and attempting to understand where they're actually coming from. So even though a story about why the earth is flat and how they did it and such and such and such might require you 4 hours of YouTube videos to understand, and you still don't agree with it, even though now I think I understand, the needs which drive a person to engage in that story are easy to resonate with because we all share those already. We all share those already. So I wanted to play a little game with you. That's right. The sermon's not over, even though I'm over time, but we had tech issues. So you got to play my game with me. And I just wanted to take a couple of the difficult cognitive dissonance issues and see if we can try some reflecting back empathy. So I'm going to screen share for you this this list of human needs. This list of human needs, universal human needs. Here we go. And let's just think about someone who says, well, I'm not wearing that mask. That mask is actually part of such and such's plot to weaken the human race and make us not be able to see each other's facial expression. Like, think about what it's doing to the children. Think about what your masking ways are doing to the children. Okay, you may not believe that story, but what do you think they are needing? What do you think they're needing? I don't know if I have this whole list here. Yeah, that's all the list we got. Allison, I see your hand. What do you think they're needing?
Autonomy.
Autonomy. Beautiful. Anybody else want to go? I can't see you all while I'm screen sharing, so maybe just pop on if you have an idea. What might they be needing?
Reassurance.
Reassurance, I heard. And then somebody else?
Safety.
Safety? Yeah, safety. So they might actually be feeling that somebody's trying to harm them, right? They might really believe that someone's trying to harm them. Okay, what about her emails? Her emails. Okay, you may not believe any of the stories about her emails, but a person who is ascribing to this story, you know, like, they're trying to pull a wool over your eyes. They're creating a race of sheeple who just follow along with whatever the establishment says. What might they be needing? What might they be needing?
Acknowledgement.
Acknowledgement. Yeah, like they have a concern. They'd like their concern to be acknowledged. Okay, what else might they be needing?
Congruence?
Congruence? Tell me more.
Information.
Information. Congruence, Allison, do you mean like transparency? Like
Yes.
words and we see that
Yeah,
everything lines up? Yeah.
we have.
So, and then I might say here, trust. Trust, right? And so how many of you, stop this screen share, how many of you might resonate with the thought, I don't always trust my government? Does anybody resonate with that thought? Okay, good. The video will be covered over with a picture later when I put this on YouTube. So it's really easy to get to what's underneath there. I don't always trust my government. And in that moment, if you can hear that, what I have found is that the person senses that you are not calling them crazy, that you're not making them an other. We can walk this unique line that says, I don't agree with the story you're telling me. That story doesn't meet my needs for evidence. I don't agree with your strategy about it. I think that strategy violates my values. But I do understand how you got there. And I want you to know that I think your needs are beautiful, worthy, and important. Cognitive resonance. Okay, so what do you think? That's going to be pretty easy, right? Just, I've pep talked to you, now you're going to get out there and do it? No, it's not particularly easy, but I want to let you know, I believe that this may be the most important thing that we can do at this time. I know it doesn't seem like enough. We want big solutions for how to wipe out dangerous conspiracy theorists, those other guys, those crazy others. That actually, there is a need for that, and that comes down to voting, policy, pressuring corporations, innovating. But what can we do today, right now, as us? We can create the type of space in our interactions where there is a chance for cognitive dissonance to soften. And that's what actually heals. As a Taoist, I can tell you our belief system is that you cannot mandate a good society into existence. Making a law that says everyone has to be nice does not a nice society produce. But you can till the soil, fertilize it, and plant the seeds of that good society by your very own actions. We must still live our values. We must still speak up. By no means should you get the impression that I'm saying don't interrupt misogynist jokes. Of course, if this Supreme Court keeps messing around, we'll all riot about gay marriage, of course. But if we live our values without ostracizing and disrespecting, we create the kind of spaces where people might have a chance of reconsidering the harmful ideas that make so much sense when you're afraid, like all of us seem to be afraid in these times. So this is our sermon this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope this has given you some seeds of controversial ideas that have tickled your cognitive dissonance and perhaps even supplied a little cognitive resonance.